daughter Reuben and introduce him and everything else. So I won't take your job, Ginger. Another union. You go ahead.
All right. Well, we have 20 people in here tonight. Nice attendance. Thank you, everybody, for being here. So, as you know, tonight, Darby and I are a little dressed up a little bit different after our wonderful movie we did last week. Reuben has been a family friend of my husband's for a very, very long time, probably since the 80s, Reuben, if you know Bob, since the 80s.
Since the 80s when I was like a small child.
And my husband's mentor was Reuben's dad, Paul Leader. But Reuben has had an incredibly impressive career in television history, which a lot of us are familiar with from the 1980s. He's a producer, writer, director, an actor in a few things, a sound man for one movie, which we'll get into that later. But he's written episodes for The Incredible Hulk. He's done Walker, Texas Ranger, Tales of the Gold Monkey, Kung Fu: The Legend Continues, Flipper, the reboot, right, of Flipper, not the original Flipper, but the reboot of Flipper that was in '96. Obvious Magnum PI, which I think you wrote like 30-something episodes.
30 or 31. Yeah, I wrote the most of anyone.
And you directed one, and you produced from season 2 all the way to the end. Season 2 to season.
No, I left after season 6, and then I worked for Columbia, where I created a show that we shot in Berlin, a post-Cold War spy thriller that actually starred John Hillerman from Magnum.
Really?
And Jeff McKay.
So you left before the end of Magnum. So
yeah, 6
So I don't have to blame you for losing the money on that Higgins was actually going to be,
I thought that. Yeah, you don't want to ask me about that.
Remember, Darby, we're keeping this all positive.
I was no longer in charge.
Well, I hope it's positive. And, the only thing I got to say is I love Glenn, okay? Glenn Larson was a wonderful friend and wonderful guy. So we'll all stay positive as long as you're positive about him. Because sometimes people try to tell these stories about old Glenn. But I mean, man, look at all the things he created and did. That was amazing.
Oh, he was a one-man machine.
My favorite one is the one he did overnight. He wanted to get out of his contract with Universal, and he wanted to move over to 20th Century Fox. But he had a 3-picture deal, and he'd already given him 2, and he didn't have that last one. He couldn't think what. So overnight, he came up with, what do I got to do? If it's a guy thing, it's a guy. Guys like cars. My Mother the Car. That was a really funny show. What if it took and overnight he wrote Knight Rider and just kind of like threw it at him. Here, let me out of my contract so I can go over there. And of course, we all know what happened with Knight Rider. I love Glenn. And my last story I'll say that is how I met him. Was my sister was living in Hawaii. We always used to go to Hawaii. My mom loved it. My mom passed. And we had a celebration of her life here. And we had a big celebration of her life in Hawaii, or we were setting one up. And all the entertainers, because she always loved entertainers, some of the best ones were coming to play and everything. And one of the things they were going to do is all take the surfboards out into the ocean. And my sister's house at the time was like one house back from the ocean and the beach down there in Portlock. And the beach you could go in Hawaii, the beaches are always public, but where the main big beach was in front of Glenn Larson's compound that he had down there. So it was my job to go up, didn't know him, anything else, go up, knock on the door. Excuse me, Mr. Larson, I just want to let you know that we're going to have this wake from my mom, and it's going to be in front of your house. And I just, there's going to be some fun. He opened up his house to us, the front lawn. And it was wonderful. And we were fast friends and bowling partners and everything after that. So that's it. That's my Glenn story. That's why I don't want to hear anything bad about him. Anybody that opens up the house to a funeral is not a bad guy.
No, I met him a couple of times, worked with him a couple of times. He was a really good guy. In fact, the way I met him was there was a writer named Steve Miller, who's a real close friend of mine. He, Steve, I'll go off on a tangent. Steve's a funny story. He was a English professor at the University of Texas, had a doctorate, and his thesis was on Jonathan Swift. And he and his wife, they were high school sweethearts, they were married, living the life of academics. And he decides to write a All in the Family. And he sends it out to All in the Family in Hollywood. And these are the days when people read scripts. Someone read a script and said, "Would you like to come out to Hollywood?" It changed his life. Um, he gave up being an English professor, and they moved out to, they wound up in the San Fernando Valley, and I became close friends with him. And he worked on All in the Family, the sequel, Archie's Place. He wrote the episode that killed off Edith. And anyway, he worked a lot for Larson, and through Steve, I met Larson and worked with him on a couple of shows. And truly, you're right. He was really a good guy.
Now, would
In fact, Steve's daughter, last thing, Steve's daughter married Larson's son, one of Larson's sons.
Which one? Yes, he had like 11 children.
I think he was a Mormon, yeah.
He was a good Mormon boy. Yes, yes. I was friends with like at least 4 or 5 of them, but yeah, he had a lot of kids.
I forgot the guy's name, but but he was a nice guy.
Now, did he still have like control over the scripts? Like when you submitted a script, it went through him and then network, or how did that dynamics go?
No, when I came over to Magnum after the first season, which was a strike season, so it was written by people who are allegedly not in the Writers Guild. So I had nothing to do with those first few episodes. But when I came over, Larson he had left the studio. He'd left Universal at that point, I think, and Belisario was in charge. And then Tom, and well, there were some issues there, and Belisario had to take a more hands-off posture, and so me and a bunch of other young people ran the show, and they kept bringing in these old producers, thinking, well, these kids, they don't know what they're doing, but we did okay.
Yeah, and Belisario didn't. He wasn't hurting either afterwards.
No, he was. Well, I had to pay for quite a few wives, but he wasn't hurting.
Yeah, Glenn had 1 or 2 of those too. Hollywood, don't we love it? Now, you grew up a kid, right? And your dad made you do everything in the business?
I was born in New York, and we moved out in '58 when the Dodgers did. My dad always said we moved out because the Dodgers did. And I believed him. I mean, my first game was in Ebbets Field. And so he was a singer and an actor, but then had a bunch of ear operations, had vertigo, crashing through plate glass windows, that kind of thing. So he went behind the camera, became a director of ultra low budget movies, and he would make some really cult ones, like I Dismember Mama, Ape, which you mentioned before, the one in Korea with the 3D monster movie, 3D ape movie. And he would make those to get the money to make the more serious ones that were closer to his heart. He made one called Going to Chicago with Cleavon Little. Remember him from Blazing Saddles. And so my sisters and I grew up in that environment, and it wasn't like expected that we do anything, but it was just sort of like the family business. So at 11 years old, I did my first one. I was assistant to the prop man, learned to ride a Vespa. And then so gradually I learned every department. I learned how to run sound. I learned camera. Mimi really learned camera. She was the first female cinema fellow at AFI in cinematography, and then went on to become a pretty notable director. But so we worked on everything and learned everything. Then my dad asked me to start co-writing some of these with him, and writing was always, I was kind of torn between playing baseball and pursuing that. I was a decent left-handed pitcher, crafty left-handed pitcher. And I also was a musician. And as I was telling you before we started,
You
and
you and Kurt Russell couldn't baseball, business. I don't know.
yeah, but I knew I'd never be a great pitcher. I knew I would never be a great, musician. I wasn't going to be the Beatles or anything. So writing came, I want to say it comes easy. It doesn't really come easy, but it was something I understood intuitively, I guess. And then working with my dad on co-writing a couple of those with him. So combine that with the production experience I got, it really, when I finally got my break at Universal on the Hulk, I rose pretty quickly because they realized I understood production. I understood how to get a show, how to write a show so you can shoot it in 7 days in those days. So,
and I'm laughing because that really is a skill. I mean, you have writers who don't know, and they put in 20 locations with all the set changes, and
yeah.
So obviously, that was a blessing to know. Oh yeah, we can use that one set in all these different scenes.
Oh yeah, that's what really impressed them, in the sense that hey, let's make him a producer because he understands production. And the main thing I understood was ignore the N key on the keyboard, because never write night. Never write exterior night, because that took time. It's amazing the difference in production values between television now, where they look like incredible features, and with all the CGI as well. In those days, at the Universal lot, I think they had 27 shows on prime time at one time. And so you learn to write what are called walk and talks, where actors would just walk and talk for 5 pages and stop, look at each other, talk for 3 more pages. And that's the way you got 8 pages a day done.
Or be in a car.
Yeah.
Or driving in the car, doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, Reuben, did your dad also write for The Incredible Hulk? Or did
No,
he edit? He
no,
didn't do anything on Hulk?
I actually was in the weird position of hiring my dad, though, on that show I was telling you about, Berlin Break. That was the first international syndicated show, predated Hercules and what was the one they shot in New Zealand?
Xena?
Xena Warrior,
Princess Warrior, or whatever.
Yeah, I hired him to write one of them, and then it sort of killed me when I gotta rewrite this. And
don't tell me you had to fire your dad. You didn't have to go that far, did you?
I didn't fire him. I was 6,000 miles away anyway, so
So when you were a kid following your dad and the family around, did you do schooling on the thing, or were you just kind of pulled out of school, or?
I cut school a lot.
Yeah.
I cut school for all sorts of reasons. A lot of them just recreational. But no, any kids out there, go to college. But I never finished, and I never really tried that hard. But I was lucky enough to get my education where it helped practically, and also I like reading a lot, so I didn't grow up dumb, and except in math, I can't do that, fails. Yeah.
Well, good thing you're a writer then, right?
Yeah.
And good thing we all have a major calculator right in our hand now, right?
Yeah.
I remember at Beverly High, the last semester I was there before I took off, they all of a sudden let you use a calculator in math class. And the teacher was like, hey, you have bad eyesight, you get glasses. You got a bad brain, here's a calculator. But I need to know you know how to use the calculator. So during the test, we could use the calculator. I knew it was all downhill from there.
Yeah. I failed algebra every time, and they finally just gave me D pluses to get me out of there.
Now we get to go to Hawaii, right? And see this. I haven't seen this, and I'm naked. I'm naked in this one. I don't know if you can show it.
You are very young in this one, Darby. Do you remember how old you are? This one was done in what, 81?
No, I just know I'm hairless. Face facial.
And you're a bad guy. You're a hitman, right? Or something? Or are we not? Oh, we're not supposed to.
See? Now,
Well,
see,
you
in
look
front of
mean,
the
though.
writer,
Everybody
in front
knows
of the
you.
writer, you just gave it all away,
He
okay?
didn't write this one, so we're okay.
No, I didn't write that.
The interesting thing about this is because of the writer's strike, I guess the season didn't even start until December of 1980. So by the time your episode ran, Darby, which was the last one of the season one, it was in April.
So was
Which-
I breaking
that
the
seems-
strike to come do this one? I don't know. All I know is they said, hey, you want to go to Hawaii and, we'll put you up and you'll shoot a few days with Tom, who is a dear friend. And well, anyway, we have Tom's stories later, but I went. I hopefully I wasn't breaking anybody's. Let's watch the show. Yes, we can have you critique it and tell us how you would rewrite it and make the changes.
I don't think so.
Yeah, just as long as you give me a bigger part. That's all. We'll all agree.
Oh, that's easy.
There you go.
Well, I do have a question for Reuben. Interestingly enough, the writer's Robert Hamilton, which apparently he wrote some other Magnum episodes. So was he
Yeah.
under a different name when he first wrote it, and then they changed
No,
it back? You think? Or
I knew him. I knew him briefly because we overlapped. But I guess he really didn't care that he would never be allowed to be in the Writers Guild again, because if you scab, the Writers Guild would fine you 100%, 110% of your compensation. So I guess being in the Writers Guild wasn't that important to him. So he took the checks for writing a few episodes while there was a strike. And I honestly don't know him really well, other than just to say, hi, how are you? So I don't know his motivation. I don't know any of that. So
well, then my other question is when they say teleplay by versus story by versus writer, what's the difference between teleplay by and story by?
it could be a lot of things. Sometimes a writer comes in and pitches a very good story, but they don't really come through, and they write the story and they don't quite get it. They have like a really good germ of an idea, a really good one-liner, but the rest of the story doesn't make any sense. So they're paid for the story, which I think is what used to be 40% of the total script price. And then the writers who were on staff would write the teleplay, and that's why you would see story and teleplay.
So back then they didn't have like a writer's room, and then you guys would all just pitch a bunch of ideas, or did they?
Yeah, we had writers' rooms before they were known as writers' rooms. But we would just go, let's have a meeting on this script. Let's have a meeting on this script, and we had a whiteboard, and where we had 3x5 cards, and we'd go through the story beats, and then one of us would go off and write it, and that'd be about it. But the writers' rooms they have now are quite rigid, and the running staffs are way bigger now. We got along just fine with 4 writers, 5 writers at the most. There's an animal known as a freelance writer back then. People made a pretty good living if they could write a couple of primetime scripts a year, paid for their health insurance, paid for their mortgage, but they weren't familiar as intimately as a staff writer would be with every show. So they would get, so some part of my job would be to rewrite uh, a freelance writer's script, and we'd all sit in the writer's room and talk about the weaknesses or whatever of the script and write it. And I never did this, but a lot of times people would arbitrate, and that's another reason you would see teleplay and screen and story credit, because your credit, the more credits you got, the more chance you had of getting another job in the future, and also you got a piece of the residual because your name's on the thing. And my philosophy was we were well paid for doing what we did, and I just thought it was greedy to go to take money out of the pocket of a freelance writer in the form of future residuals, which you need to live on. As long as, if they did an honest effort, gave it their best, and they can't know everything about Magnum or whatever show it is. They don't know every character quirk. So naturally you have to fix some stuff. Locations change, so you have to write to the different locations. You lose an actor, so you have to write to the strengths of the new guest star. There's all sorts of reasons scripts get rewritten, and it's totally unfair to take money in the form of future residual payments out of a freelance writer's pocket. Nowadays, everybody just writes. There are no freelance writers. Everybody just writes in-house, and they do fewer episodes a year. And so freelance writers they're like dinosaurs now. I only arbitrated one person one time, and that's because they kept lying to me about when they would deliver the script, and I wound up having to fly over on a weekend to Hawaii and rewrite the script on the plane on a yellow pad. And that's the only guy I arbitrated because they lied.
So, because now the big talk is always about the show Bibles, and the Magnum fans are pretty big fan base. So my question is, did you guys have like a show Bible that you worked off of, that certain elements of this is what the character is about that you had to know to write it in? Or
yeah, around the third season, I wrote the Bible that we used to hand out to freelance writers, so they'd have a better idea of the show coming in, or once they went into the story and script, they would know stuff that the Bible. And I didn't realize that you're supposed to get paid for that. So I never didn't find that out till after. But yeah,
that's why they gave you that producer title. They didn't pay you; they just gave you another title.
You're probably the first one to create it too, so they didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, no, I think
Ginger, run the show, Ginger.
Well, hey, this is important, Darby. This is what we don't get a chance to talk to writers.
We're not losing him. He's coming back.
All right. Are you coming back, Reuben? You're coming back in our break?
I am. I just had a tooth pulled, but I'll be all right.
Well, you can go eat something. You have 23 minutes. All right. Well, let me go ahead. So the name of tonight's episode is called Beauty Knows No Pain. It's Magnum PI. Its air date was April 16th, 1981. It was directed by Ray Austin, and it was the writer credited was Robert Hamilton. So the first segment we're going to play is 23 minutes and 40 seconds. So you'll see it dip to black and come back because I'm going to combine two segments, and Darby appears in the second segment. So we will be back at the break. So
that's the good part.
Around the 11-minute mark, right?
It's when he shows up. That's when it'll dip to black, but we won't. You'll see ours pop up in 23 minutes or when we take the break. So just
all right, cool.
You'll know. Anyways, we'll be back.
Cool. Enjoy, everybody.
Good place to freeze frame. I like that.
I know. Darby, you're a baby in this. I swear.
and see, I was on a lot earlier there. I was trailing them in the car. You just didn't look hard enough there, Ginger.
That's true. I didn't. There's Reuben. He's back.
You're just a little kid then. Yeah. Wow.
I know.
Like I said, I'm naked. I don't know if I should be showing this.
Yeah, I've had a beard forever. I shaved it about 2 weeks ago. I did one of those things where I forgot to put the guard on there. And so I basically gave my cheek a mohawk and just got rid of it.
I've come close. There's been a couple times I'm shaving. I'm like, yeah, maybe it's time to, if I'd really been committed to doing this, I would have taken it down to the Tom Selleck mustache there, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So when I did that, I went, okay, let's do a goatee. And I'm thinking, this is pretty 90s looking. And so I got rid of that, went to the mustache, and then thought, no, this is like too much Village People. And so
Well, Tom on this taught me how to take care of the mustache because in his dressing room, I would see he would get the mirror up and make sure it was trimmed and everything was just right. He knew that was such a hook, a thing for him, that he took good care of it.
Yeah.
But you didn't have a mustache though in this episode.
Me? No. But I mean later. I mean, I always remember that. Because you first, when you're on the set, an actor picks up a mirror, you're like, oh, how vain. But then when you see what he's doing, and you do have to do that.
All right. So Darby, did you do the driving when that part where car goes flying by at the gas station and stops and backs up? Is that you?
Yeah, I did all the driving in this. I think, as you could see in Reuben looking, the stunt budget in this one wasn't that big. So yes, and actually there's a scene later in here where the first AD got very upset at me the way I drove. But anyway, yes, I did all the driving. And speaking of driving, did you notice Magnum was running running stop signs and speeding and everything else?
He's Magnum PI. He's allowed to do that.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, he wouldn't be wearing a safety belt or something. Come on.
I have a question for Reuben. I read somewhere that they said that this set or this show picked up right when Hawaii Five-0 ended, that they were looking to use the sets for Hawaii Five-0. So that's why they did Magnum there. Is that true?
Yeah, that's a lot of the reason. Yeah, CBS always wanted what they called a blue sky show. So people in Buffalo on a snowy February would have something to urinate for. So when Hawaii Five-0 ended, we went right into their studio, and which was up on Diamond Head, and took it over. Then when we ended, Jake and the Fat Man came in, and then the reboot of Hawaii Five-0, and then full circle, not quite full circle, but then
and Glenn's P.S. I Love You was filmed out of there too.
Then the latest reboot.
I'm sorry, not P.S. I Love You. That's Palm Springs I Love You. The one with Cheryl Ladd in Hawaii.
Yeah, something with One West Waikiki.
One West Waikiki, right. That was also out of that studio. I know that studio well. It's a great place to work, right at Diamond Head.
I put my fist through the office in my trailer in 1985 when Jack Clark hit that home run off Tom Niedenfuer and knocked us out of the playoffs. I have better memories than that, though, of that place.
So there was stuff shot on a sound stage as well as on location? There was both there?
Yeah, all the interiors generally we hardly did any practical interiors. They were all done on the set, and obviously everything else was shot outside, which was ideal. But it rained a lot, and so especially in the mornings, but usually past. But you always wanted to have what's called a cover set, which if you get into a real downpour, right, you go inside and shoot something. So that's why virtually all the interiors were on the studio.
Now, you talk about this coming in right after Hawaii Five-0, and that's where, because Tom and me and him and our family go back, we studied under Milton Casalis together.
Wow.
In all those years. And he actually came to my mom and said, I don't know what to do. I did this pilot in Hawaii that's for this television show, but now I got Spielberg wanting me for this thing called Indiana Jones. I think it's going to be a big movie. How do I get out of it? I want to get out of my contract. I want to do the movie, because back then everybody wanted to do movie over television. And it was my mom that told him. She said, listen, you go, first of all, you don't piss off the whole studio. You go, you do this. So the star of Hawaii Five is Hawaii. That's the star of it. It's gonna be a great run. You're gonna be great in it. Just go do it and don't look back. And obviously he took some of her advice, which he always thanked her for later. And the rest is history.
No, it's truly great advice. I mean, he couldn't wait towards the last couple of seasons, he always did a movie in the summer. And probably most people don't remember any of those movies, maybe Quigley Down Under. But the rest of them, I don't even remember that much. And I had to go out to the sets of those movies to talk to him about the upcoming season. But he made the right decision. I mean, I had a real good run. My dad always said, stay in television. The money's in television. And you got to support your family and blah, blah, blah. And still, there was the lure of movies because TV was always looked on as sort of a stepchild then. I did some movies, and problem with doing movies is they take forever. Then sometimes they don't get made, and you're one of 18 writers who are rewriting them, and it's not what you signed up for. You're just alone in a room and writing something for 10 executives, and that's all who ever see it generally. So yeah, I had a good run with movies, but my first love was always just TV and film.
My mom thought long and hard when they offered me the Daniel Boone series when I walked into the wrong office, because she had me wanting to do movies instead of the television. But fortunately, I think because of Fess and everything else, that she said yes. So I agree. You become such a family on these shows because you're there every week and you see everybody and you know everybody. It's great. And movie, you get close to people, but it's either 6 weeks, even if it's 6 months, but then it's done and you're out of there and you may never see anybody again.
Yeah, that's kind of the cool thing about Facebook. I resisted it for a long, long time. And as Ginger well knows, I just got on it a few weeks ago, a month ago maybe. And you just read, and there's so many crew people and actors that you worked with and you lost touch with. It's such a great way to reconnect with people. And yeah, it's great. Absolutely great.
You need to talk to my husband about that because he's still resisting.
I mean, I didn't want to run into anybody like we cut you off at first draft because your draft sucked. I didn't want to run into you ruined my life and go, or maybe a relationship that didn't work out so well. I didn't want any of that, but so far it's been nothing but it's been fun.
Which leads me into the reason Reuben joined Facebook is he's just recently published a book that's called "You Might Feel a Little Prick," which I'll let him give a little bit more of a description on that, because at first that sounds a little. You have to know Reuben's sense of humor.
Can't you get arrested just for saying that these days?
No, but you got to be careful in what parts of where you say it, I guess. But it's kind of what every doctor or nurse says to you before they really hurt you.
Oh, there's a copy of it. I think I have a copy of your website here.
There you go.
Hold on.
Anyway, I think I mentioned I played baseball and I also played basketball, and around 45 or something like that, I started, there was no traumatic injury, but I just my back started hurting. And I went down a rabbit hole of, well, we'll do this procedure. Our last resort is always surgery and blah, blah, blah. And I've wound up having 4 spinal fusions, a fake knee, new hip, just tons of a heart thing that was just out of the blue. A rheumatologist later figured out I have some sort of weird autoimmune disease that began in my spine, and that triggered all that. But none of these doctors knew that at the time. And so my my experience going through, there's some really good, dedicated doctors out there, but there's also plenty, plenty of people in it just for the money. And really, I don't want to be political, but tell me one good reason. What's an insurance company got to do with the practice of medicine? They're between a doctor and a patient, and all they're doing is pulling money out of the thing. And I don't know the solution. I don't pretend to, but all I know is they got their cut. They got their cut. They got their cut. The doctors cut me, and so and I thought, well, if I wrote about this experience as a documentary, as a memoir, it would just be really, really angry. And so I decided to write it as a screenplay. And I made it really funny, dark, very darkly funny.
I was going to ask, is this a comedy?
It's very funny, but it's ultimately kind of moving at the end. But it's really funny, and I didn't make the character me. I made it someone else. And,
Of course, wink, right?
It's very darkly funny, and for anybody who's ever had a bad experience with an insurance company or with a doctor who gave you a procedure that led to another procedure, it led to a surgery, and a surgery that needed to be tweaked, and they'll appreciate this book. It's really funny, and it's kind of gory, and if you have a weak stomach, maybe you shouldn't read it, but it's really and
But this is your revenge novel?
yeah, I got to kill a couple of doctors off, and basically it's their own hubris, their own greed that got them killed. My characters don't murder them. My characters are victims of the whole thing.
Karma just comes in and works.
Exactly.
That's exactly it. I mean, that's what they say. They said karma's doing this, but yeah. So I wrote it, and it's gotten really. I sound egotistical, but it's gotten really good pre-reviews. I just got a website. It went live today.
Congratulations.
There you go. There's your website, Reuben.
Oh, wow.
And there's the book. And I think you can buy it on Amazon. You can buy it on like this little video. You can learn a little bit more about Reuben.
And there's your beard. I like that. I saw that.
Oh, I like it. You're down to letters, YMFALP.
They asked me to write some blogs. I didn't know what to write about. So I wrote one. The one in the middle is about this movie we did that my dad did, and it's called Ape, and it's probably the worst movie ever made. We had an awfully good time making it in Korea, and so in that blog, there's a link to a real long interview I did for this Japanese or an Asian Japanese monster movie site. I didn't know there was such a thing, but it was pretty fun. And those women you saw there and the other one, those are my sisters. And so I wrote a little sappy thing about them. But thank you, Ginger. I hope,
It just went live yesterday as far as the website, so that's timely. But again, you can buy his book online on Amazon if you're interested. Is it Kindle? Is it available Kindle as well?
Yeah, it's available on Kindle. And I just learned this, and maybe it's a function of me joining the 21st century. You don't even need a Kindle to read an ebook.
Right.
You can download the
Kindle app, yes, on your iPad, on anything else. That's true.
Download the Kindle app, whether you have Apple or Android, and you can read it on any device you have, iPad, or your
Technology.
I know.
Amazing. But, kills time waiting around in doctor's offices.
I'm sure they would say, what are you reading? We did have a couple questions from the audience. I don't know if you'll know the answer to this or not, Reuben, but do you know what the lighting company that the production company used?
I don't.
My mother is asking because my family's history is Brigham Gelatin that used to supply lighting gels to Hollywood way back in the day. So She's getting in a plug.
This studio had their vendors, and but that was something we never were concerned with or dealt with, had to deal with. But
Yes.
sorry.
Pamela, yes. Pamela Riley Pavkovich wants to know, Mr. Leader, while working on Magnum PI, what was your favorite episode?
Oh gosh, there's a couple. I wrote a two-parter called All for One, parts 1 and 2, with Robert Forster, who we became really good friends. But the episode was about the four of them going back to Cambodia to get an old friend of theirs who was still. They got word he was still in prison there. It was a trap, actually, but it was kind of an homage to vets, and it was an homage to those John Ford, John Wayne movies where you fought the good fight for a good reason, and that's one of my favorite ones. Some of the lighter ones were I liked as well, but All for One, I guess, is my favorite.
And it's what you wrote. There's one that you wrote, directed, and produced.
Oh yeah, that was called Round and Around, and it concerned the TC character mostly, and his circle, and what I'm kind of proud of about that is, I mean, it's not the best episode we ever did. The guest cast was mainly African American, and a couple of them got NAACP nominations for acting in it. So I was proud that I wrote something that was good enough that people got nominated for.
And how did you like directing?
I love directing. I mean, as you know, you got to be a shrink, basically.
Did you ever yell out, "We're losing light"? Come on! I mean, who was watching your back?
Oh yeah, I mean, it was funny. To be in arguments with the first AD, I go, just one more, man, just one more. But I mean, you have to, when you're wearing 3 hats, and you have to be responsible to the budget, and but you also want to put what's best possible on the screen. It's it pulls you in a lot of different ways. I enjoyed interacting with people. I enjoy it when like a take really comes together and you just sit back and watch artists really nail it. I love that.
Now, how did it come to be that you direct? This was the only one you directed. Did they ask you, or did you ask to direct it?
It was kind of mutual. I was going to do more, but my duties being head writer were more important. And we had a very good cadre of directors, so it would have been more of an ego thing. In Germany, there was less. We had fewer directors to choose from, so I directed. We did 26 episodes. I think I directed maybe 7 or 8 of them. I directed a movie with Donald Sutherland after the Germans liked me. I directed a movie with Donald Sutherland and Greta Scacchi. Based on a true story. In '94, a ferry boat called the Estonia sank in the North Sea, and it turns out this German producer did a documentary on it and found out that Soviet Union was breaking up, and the Russian army commanders were selling everything that wasn't nailed down because the soldiers weren't getting paid anymore, and they were smuggling stuff on this ferry boat. And it blew up, and 1,000 people lost their lives. So that was a very intense bit of directing. And Jürgen Prock, now from a really famous movie called Das Boot, submarine movie in the 70s.
Yeah, good movie.
You starred in that also, and that was a terrific experience. I mean, unfortunately, all the physical stuff that happened to me prevented me from doing any more. But the brain kind of works, so I'm still writing, and I love directing. Thanks for the question.
That one was called Baltic Storm, if anybody's wondering what the title was on the ferry boat one he was just talking about. Is that available anywhere? Do you know, Reuben?
Yeah, I think it's still, the DVD is still on Amazon. Yeah.
And Ape, I know, is available on DVD. That one. That one's been around forever, and if you can get a hold of it, it's quite funny. But you need to find Reuben's article because he tells he tells some really good inside stories since he and his dad were the ones. And Joanna Kearns, she was Joanna de Verona, I think, in that plays the starlet, who's you all would know is Joanna Kearns from Growing Pains, the mother of Growing Pains.
At the time, her sister was way more famous because her sister was an Olympic swimmer.
Oh yeah,
Donna de Verona. Yeah, Joanna and I we still keep in touch, and actually Facebook brought us back together. And that movie you really should watch impaired. There's no other way to do it. I remember when we came back from Korea and the movie was cut and scored. And I'll be really quick. We had a screening for all the cast and friends and crew and the non-Korean crew at a really ratty theater in Hollywood called the Vista. And so the projectionist runs reel 1, reel 2. He skips to reel 4, then runs reel 3, then runs reel 5. No one knew the difference. No one knew. My dad's freaking out. I'm just laughing my ass off. It was awfully funny.
You were Pulp Fiction before Pulp Fiction, I guess.
People should be required to watch that impaired.
Well, and that's the thing you'll find about Facebook is that people have ways to find. Now, some are great. Like they found me the one I did with Art Linkletter, who I went through Art Linkletter and CBS and Ron Howard. I mean, and nobody had copies of this. And then somebody on Facebook, hey, I happen to have a copy. We've almost tracked down Do It in the Dirt, but some of those that you really wish kind of went away, you find that they have a way of coming back. They even tracked down the Baba Black Sheep. I was impressed. That wasn't listed anywhere.
And you know what's interesting is back then, as you know, writers, directors, actors, any credit they really didn't like, they just left off their resume because the resume was just a piece of paper. And no one contemplated an internet or an IMDb. So when IMDb comes along and at least a third of the stuff on there about me is wrong, so credits like Ape appear and you go, well, how do you live that down? But you know what? My dad asked me to do it. I did it with my dad. I did it with my sister, and we had fun doing it.
And it isn't like you had a couple of successful things in between, you know, so I think you're okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's all right, you know. It was family, and we got some love for Baba Black Sheep. Larry Minetti from Magnum was in that, as Cassie Turner probably knows.
Yeah, and Larry, well, I did a 5-0 too, and yeah, the Baba Black Sheep was my, Ginger and I had a little talk about this. That was one of my worst days. I even got a speeding ticket leaving Universal and going over the Cahuenga Pass because I couldn't get out of there fast enough. Well, anyway, that's a whole other story. We won't go into the Baba.
For those who are curious where Darby's part is in it, it is in episode 1. It's like season 1, episode 0. See, it was the pilot, so it's the 90-minute Flying Misfits pilot. He's 17 minutes
okay,
in.
Reuben will understand now.
And he salutes Robert Conrad, and then he walks off.
Now I have to tell the story why this is. So I'm up for this new series. And, you know, Wild Wild West was my show growing up, you know, so I'm Conrad and everything. And I'm like so excited. And I've gone through all the cattle calls, and it's whittled down to me and the guy that got it. I mean, that's it. We're up.
W.K. Stratton, who played Wiley.
We're up to the network, everything else. The studio gave me the nicest kiss off I have ever had, I will say. You know, they're like, well, you know, we have Robert Conrad, who's a really good looking guy. And, you know, so I don't think we need another really good looking guy. So we're going another way. I'm like, but, you know, do you want to be in the first episode? You know, if you want, we have a part we can give you. I'm like, of course, you know, now I got to go show them what they passed up on, right? You know, come on, of course. Give me the scene. I'll act the heck out of it. What is it? And I go, and first of all, it's in the 70s. So I go to my hairdresser, you know, very expensive, Beverly Hills. I said, now, make it look as short as possible, but leave as much on as you can. And of course, I get to the set and their army.
By the way,
Huh?
I've never said those words.
Well, I get there and they're, army guy that makes sure everything is, army. He looks at me and goes, no, no, no. And he sends me into makeup and they get the razor and they shave my head and everything. And then like Ginger said, my seat is coming up and going, yes, 2 words to Robert Conrad, and I'm out of there. I'm like, I have a shaved head. I just did one of the smallest. Oh, and I sit there during the rehearsal. We come up, hi, how do you do? All this fine. And we do the scene, and then we're waiting for the lighting, and he looks up at me. I think that was the first scene. He looks up at me. He's like, so I hear you do martial arts. I'm like, yes, I have. So you think you could take me? And I'm like, well, you're James West. I don't want to, I didn't say that, but I'm like, yeah, no, I don't think this. I mean, he really, that commercial he did with the chip on his shoulder. Oh, that was Robert. I mean, he was like, yeah, well, come on, let's see how that martial arts goes and stuff. But anyway, yeah, so that's it. Episode 0. Good luck finding it. So Reuben, like I said, they'll find anything for you.
Oh, they sure will. They sure will.
We're good at that. Peggy and Nicole want to know how many days you were on set, Darby, for the Magnum PI.
I don't know. Most of the week, it was a shot in a week, and so there were a couple days maybe I wasn't there for some of the interiors and stuff, but I don't know. It's not bad being on set in Hawaii. I'm looking at those locations. I know exactly where they are. I'm like, okay, I'm ready to go to the Howe Terrace at the Outrigger and have some fun.
Yeah, 6 years I could drive a cab. I used to be able to. I could have driven a cab in Honolulu.
Well, it's not that big. I mean,
35 miles, but yeah.
Peggy and Nicole said, Reuben, what was the Robin Masters estate in real life? It was really somebody's home, right?
Yeah, it was a rich person's home, and I never actually met her, but it was all the way on the other side of the island, on the leeward side, and we were not allowed to, of course, shoot inside. So every inside scene you see there was shot on the set at Diamond Head. Beautiful place, but no, I never knew the people who owned it.
Ironically, in the second half of this episode, when Magnum is getting out of the ocean, the woman who owns it is actually in the race. She's the woman that walks out in front of him. And some fan discovered that. I didn't find that. Somebody posted that on the Magnum group or something. So I think she's like number 26. She really was a triathlon person, I guess. So apparently she's in the episode. So
I think Obama bought a house. If not that house, he may have bought a house right around there after he retired from the presidency. I read that somewhere.
And Tom had his place at Black's Point there and stuff.
Yeah.
Does he still own a house there, you think?
I've never met.
No.
I don't know. And you mentioned Jake and the Fat Man, and I went back and I did one of those.
Oh wow.
And that poor actor, he just was bad mouthing it. He couldn't wait to get out of Hollywood. He hated being in that fishbowl with all the tourists. And the worst part was I'm like doing a scene with him. We had a prison scene, and he's sitting there talking about how much he hates Hawaii with the crew, which is mostly Hawaiian, or certainly people that live there and love it. And I mean, he fought like heck to where they finally moved that series back to LA, and it didn't last the rest of the season.
No, that was crazy. I love Hawaii.
I know my sister that lives there keeps going, why can't you get a series here? Oh, gee, Dar, I'm just turning them all down. I'm sorry.
You guys remember an actor named Ivan Dixon? He was the African-American actor that was in Hogan's Heroes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Then he later did a couple of movies and then became a working television director. And that's how I met him as a director. He directed a number of Magnums, and he always crews loved him because he always rapped at about 4 p.m. especially on a Friday. I remember we're standing on the beach outside the Colony Surf where we would stay, and which was next door to Outrigger.
Right.
And so we're watching the sunset. There's people on the beach, and he said, "Hey, Reuben, what are you seeing?" And I'm going, "I don't know, people on the beach and sun setting." And he goes, "No, what are you seeing?" And I didn't have an answer. And he said, "Everybody's some shade of brown, from being tanned or being Portuguese and whatever, and Filipino and Asian." And he said, "This is the future of the world. This is what the world's going to look like long after I'm dead and you're dead." And he said, "I'm going to retire in this place." And sure enough, he went and bought a radio station in Maui. And I used to visit him every year after Magnum was over. He was such a nice guy. Yeah, Ivan Dixon was great. And I don't know why I got off on that tangent.
Listen, another one of my all-time favorite people in the business, Jim Neighbors. That's where he moved, and he had his macadamia ranch in Maui, and spent the last of his years there and just loved it. I tried to tell Fess how much money he was making per acre for macadamia and compared to the vineyard. Fess like, "Are you sure about that? Call him up. Let me know." But hey, it's not a bad place. I mean, Wayne Dyer,
If you like paying $6 a gallon for gas, it's great.
Yeah, but you don't drive very far. That's the thing. I mean, my sister's lived there now, I don't know how many decades. Her husband's father's the one that designed the International Marketplace. Remember back when that was and the Sheraton in Maui where the lobby's on the top and you take the elevator down the cliffs, and a lot of those classic Hawaiians was her husband's father's designs. So he's been a Hawaii boy his whole life.
Yeah.
And all her kids, they tried moving out and they all said, "Oh, we got to go back to Hawaii," and they all love it there.
People always say you get rock fever. I never got it. There was always something to do. And the crew, a lot of Samoans, a lot of Native Hawaiians on the crew. And it's a cliche to say that they become like family, but we did. We all played on the same softball team. We all went to each other's kids' birthdays and things like that, and have luau's. And it was really a wonderful 6 years. And you don't really appreciate it when you're in it, but after it's gone, it was really a really wonderful time.
Did you live there year round, Reuben, or would you just be there for when they were shooting and then you'd go back to LA?
I was playing a lot because I would come back and edit a couple of shows over the course of a week, and while editing at night, casting in the day, and then I'd come back and oversee a show. And I would trade off with some of the other writer producers but mostly I would say about 70% of my time was in Hawaii.
Last thing about Hawaii, and as a producer, you'll love it. It always cracks me up if I ever see Blue Hawaii and you see Hanauma Bay with him in just his little tent. I mean, could you imagine trying to shut that down today for a production? It'd be impossible. Fortunately, now they shut it down to all public for a couple days a week to let it flush out.
It's really weird. This is, again, pre-internet. I don't know whether it's jungle drums or something, but we always had, every time we were out in a location, there's hundreds and hundreds of people watching us shoot, tourists. Just tons of them. And how did they know? It's like they got the call sheet, but they were always there.
Yep. Before cell phones.
Yeah, before cell phones, before internet. So I don't know how they knew, but they knew.
It's got to be so much. It's got to be so much tougher now for some of these actors and stuff that have trackers on them. That you can't go anywhere without people knowing exactly where you are when you. Anyway, speaking of that,
like that, Darby, you don't like us tracking you, Darby? What's wrong with you?
Speaking of that, let's get back to the inconspicuous guy that's in a three-piece suit in Hawaii. no one would, he wouldn't stand out at all.
I did want to ask you, how many takes did it take when you had to kick the hubcap? Because it went from being pristine to then you kicked it and it was already dented. So did you do a couple takes on that?
I kick the heck out. I take out all my aggression. I couldn't give it a sissy kick. Come on.
Cassie asked a question a second ago. I just should answer. Some of the Asian actors, particularly on Hawaii Five-0, did parts on Magnum, and they were great. But Jack Lord obviously didn't do it, and Dano was obviously back on the mainlands by then. No, she asked the question. So I could answer it.
No, thank you, because you must have typed it in the chat. I didn't see.
See,
that,
now
so
you
for
can
that.
take Ginger's job.
Yeah. Reuben's like, yeah, no. It's easy for one day, but then when this diva over here starts demanding
The first one of these I've ever done.
with his GPS tracker.
She just called me a diva. Can you believe it? On with the show, Ginger.
Unbelievable. All right. So this last segment, obviously, we'll play it all the way through to the credits. It is 26 minutes and 11 seconds. Darby is in this a whole lot more.
So
and
it's
we've got
good.
some-
It's good.
We got some good questions for you at the end of this, Darby. So we'll see you all in about, oh my gosh, Simpler Times. Again, another one of the best theme songs ever, I have to say. Not as good as Daniel Boone, but
And-
still pretty good.
And I got a couple of good belly laughs in there. Some of those Higgins one-liners and Tom's looks. I mean, there was some. That was a good episode. That was a lot of fun.
Okay, did she really whack you in the head with the bucket?
Oh yeah.
Oh, you just went mute on me.
I wasn't even cussing. I don't know why I went mute. Yeah. Oh yeah. You're worried about her hitting me with a plastic bucket. Meanwhile, I got huge Tom Selleck tackling me to the ground.
Okay, all of America's women do not feel sorry for you for being flattened by Tom Selleck on top of you. So you don't get much sympathy from us on that one, Darby.
Ginger, this is a PG rated show, okay? Come on now. My goodness.
My goodness. I have a question for Reuben. So did they encourage you that they had to showcase Hawaii while they were there too? Like a lot of this stuff, did you have to write that in after the fact, or was that kind of?
Oh no, absolutely, yeah. I mean, Hawaii was a character almost.
A star.
Yeah.
So that was part of the deal, is you had to, because I noticed like the band, and then of course the was a real triathlon, and
it was never spelled out like that. But I mean, we'd be idiots not to be in Hawaii and not show it. So.
Yeah, just show downtown Hawaii with the big buildings and that's, Reuben said it earlier. You tune in and you take a little vacation watching this, and it's why they still have successful shows being filmed there.
Two things struck me watching that episode. One's a little bit inside baseball, but a lot of Magnum's voiceover, and remember, this was a strike-written show. It was not written by our regular staff that made the show what it was ultimately. But the amount of voiceover that Magnum did that had to do with plot was, it's a cheap way of not writing a good scene. And so as I became more comfortable in the character, I evolved a rule that the voiceovers could never be about plot. It couldn't be like, well, Bob robbed the bank, so this must be that. So, let him figure it out. But the voiceovers always had to be about how what was happening affected him, how he felt about it, how it affected his relationships with other characters. That's what made those voiceovers really special to me. So I was just struck by it. It was almost like a different show. So it didn't turn like that the minute I walked in there. It was just it was a gradual thing that we evolved to, and I think it really helped with the flavor of the show. The other thing, and I don't want to speak ill of the dead, but it's amazing looking at John in that first season. And then he became known as the human pear season after season. I mean, he just kept expanding like in a pear shape. And I mean, look at a late season episode and look at him there. And there's a, you know,
Boy, he had some one-liners though that were just great.
yeah, he's from Denton, Texas. He's not from England at all. I always got that. He's English, but he was, when you talk to him in his normal tone of voice when he was sober, just a solid Texas accent. Yeah.
The reverse of a lot of the actors today, where you hear them speaking perfect English, and then you see them off set and they got the heavy British accents.
Yeah, that's so weird, Darby. You're watching shows on that, especially with the shutdown. Watch way more television than usual. Of course, everybody did, and you see all these guys and you in the 80s when English actors trying to do American accents, they were a joke. It always came through. But they've gotten so good at it now. The dialect coaches, they're really quite good. A lot of them fool me. But I mean, which begs the question: how come American actors don't get those jobs? But anyway, that's another thing.
Well, I got to tell you, when we were in Milton Casales, Tom and Milton used to get on him about his voice. You got to go to a voice coach. You got to do something. You're a big guy. You'll never be a leading man with that voice. And I remember, excuse me, my voice is going, excuse me. I remember the first time I heard Tom do which car was it? Cadillac. He did one of the car commercials.
Yeah.
And I heard that and I'm just like, yeah, because I knew how much he got for doing that commercial. I'm like, yeah, Milton, you might have gotten that voice thing a little wrong. I think he's doing okay.
But what's funny? I think you hit on something. I've been fortunate enough to work in a lot of places around the world, in Europe and Asia, and Magnum runs everywhere. It's just a universal show, not Universal Studios, but people relate to it. And so every place I've seen it, Germany, they give them a real deep voice when they dub them. They always give them a real deep voice. And Higgins, who had a real basso profundo, they would give him a squeaky voice. I mean, it was just the opposite of how they work.
Yeah, well, listen, Israel was dubbed by a girl in a couple of countries that I saw it replayed in. So
That's funny.
We won't go there.
So your sister, Darren, chimed in about they recently tore the Magnum house down, she said.
Oh.
She said Obama's best friend bought the house, tore it down, and built two houses, one for him and one for Obama. So thank you, Darren, for clarifying that.
I bet Darren texted me because I said, you know what? I don't have any good pictures of Tom to pull up. And I was so into watching that episode. I really liked it. I hadn't seen it. That I bet. Anyway, it's late now. I'll post some fun ones later.
Reuben, do you keep in touch with any of the actors that were in there, like Larry Minetti or any of those guys? Do you keep in touch with any of them?
For probably about 20 years, yeah. But then we gradually got out of touch. Had a couple of reunions, and we were invited to be the whole cast, the writers and producers. So we were invited to speak at the Museum of Radio and Television. So we did a panel discussion there and a couple of birthdays. But over the years, Tom has that show in New York, and so we just sort of gradually drifted apart. But I run into people once in a while in the supermarket. Run into the prop guy. This guy lost an Uzi. He lost a working Uzi.
Oh, gosh.
He never lived that down. Universal fired him. Because they found it, I think, on a marijuana plantation in Maui. The Uzi. He lost an Uzi. That was a prop, and so I ran into him in a market called Yeltsin somewhere time in early 2000s. And I go, correct, in here looking for that Uzi. It's just, almost killed me.
Now, has the new Magnum PI asked you to consult or do anything when they decided they were coming out with this reboot on Magnum?
No, I don't think I would have done it anyway. We struck gold there, and it was pretty magical. And I watched the other one, and I don't want to speak ill of it, but it was just sort of another TV show. It wasn't. We had something, the chemistry with that cast, the combination of the cast and
Well, and you did some groundbreaking things, in the storylines where the hero, I mean, we all know all us, and that gunshot that was just heard.
Yeah.
And the fact that he was running stop signs in front of the church, he pulled up in the red zone and stuff. And I guess, yes, I maybe do owe the first AD. It does look like I hit the curb a little bit. But when I pulled that car up fast, well, the director told me probably, he goes, and he said, now I want you coming in hot, because you got to get them. The bad guys are there and stuff. I said, okay. So I pulled it up real hot, and I pulled it around the Ferrari real hot. And of course, they weren't worried about the car I was driving. They were worried about the Ferrari. And boy, when as soon as they yelled cut, that AD was, if I wanted a stunt driver, I would have hired one. What are you doing? And fortunately, Ray, the director, came over. No, that's what I wanted. It's okay. But the AD was not happy with me.
Oh, Ginger, to go back to that question, but they did try and rip me off the new Magnum. I created a couple of characters, and you get something called character payments if you create a character and they recur. Like I created Lieutenant Tanaka, for instance, and I created this character, Luther Gillis, and they used them and didn't ask, they didn't pay me for them as they were supposed to. So someone called me up and said, hey, do you know Tanaka's on the show? And so I called up the Writers Guild, and they got me my character payments. But so they did try and rip me off, so I didn't appreciate that. They know better.
Now, did I also hear you got residuals when they did a Magnum for the Goldbergs?
Oh, that was bizarre. I go, $300. This is great. Where'd this come from? Goldbergs? What's the Goldberg? So I was just in comment. And one of the characters was one of the kids apparently was a real Magnum freak, and they used some clips out of the show I had written, and so that was kind of cool.
So now you did the Kung Fu the reunion, right? So it was after the movie.
I think they
The Legend Continues is what it was called.
Yeah.
Right.
That was in '94, I believe.
Because I'm helping Radimus set it up. They're coming up on their 50th year anniversary, and we might get Radimus back in from France and have a little Kung Fu reunion and stuff. So that would be fun.
Carradine, he passed away too soon. He was a really good guy. I mean, he got in a share of trouble and all that, but he was a really good guy. Good actor too.
Yeah, he was. Absolutely.
I mean, he comes from a family of great actors. His dad, everybody remember the John Wayne movie Stagecoach in 1939, I think.
A long time ago.
But John Carradine played the gambler in that. His dad.
We had Bobby on here doing it because his dad was in a Daniel Boone, so we had Bobby on here.
So we had Bobby watching his dad do the show. That was fun.
Was it Bobby or Keith who was in that Western, McCabe and Mrs. Miller, who got shot off the bridge, the gunslinger? Do you know which one it was?
I don't know. Somebody want to chime in here? What do they know? I don't know.
I know
That's a new one.
Bobby worked with my dad.
Todd Newport says Keith.
It was Keith.
So maybe. Well, this is funny though, because I found the episode of Kung Fu, the original Kung Fu that had John and Bobby and Keith is in it, but Keith is like when they flash back to when they're doing the martial arts stuff, whatever. But Bobby is a mute. He doesn't say a single word in the whole episode. So of course, Bob, my husband, had to call him and say, Mo, that's the way I should cast you, huh?
That's one way to get the lines right.
But he was really young. It was about the same time that he did, I guess, did the Cowboys and Bonanza and all that. He was is 17 or 18. He was real young. But anyway, so I guess that's about it as far as the Magnum.
This has been a fun evening. It was really nice to meet you.
Likewise.
You know, it's like Bobby. Bobby and I laugh about this, that we didn't get to know each other until we just did a movie, Bill Tillman and the Outlaws together, even though we were both kid actors and running around Hollywood and everything else. And unfortunately, I have never had a chance to meet you yet, but this has been a lot of fun. I look forward to the day we can see each other in person.
Yeah, I look forward to those days as well.
So don't forget Reuben's book. So check out his website, reubenleader.com. Check out his book.
You
Like
may
you can
feel
buy
a
it.
little prick.
All right, well, it'll make you laugh a lot. And I think people will relate to a lot of what my characters go through here.
And I also have to do a plug here for, a couple of things. This is not to do with you, Reuben, but one thing is I know everybody heard the announcement about the Johnny Crawford Memorial. I just want to stress to people that are on here that that is going to be an invite-only event. So
Because
even if
of the
people are
COVID.
just because of COVID, because it's a limited space, limited parking. So out of respect for the family, if you're not on the invite list, please spread the word to not just show up, because that's only going to put undue stress on the family who's trying to have a nice memorial ceremony. I think it's scheduled for July. So anyway, so just make a note of that. Or if you hear of anybody who's talking about crashing it, please don't. They're talking about taping it, and they're also talking about maybe doing something online or something like that. So you'll have a chance to say your goodbyes and respect as far as that. So just keep that in mind.
But you know, Hart was one of his favorite characters. That's why we let him come in and play Hart in Bill Tillman. And the fact they're doing it on the ranch there and everything else, it'll be a special, fun time.
You
And I
know,
want to thank everybody that was hunting down Fabian for the kiss that rocked Boonesboro. Veronica's
Yes.
going to come on, and we're going to have fun watching that show together.
And just a note on that too, when helping Darby, send him an email. Try not to, or have him contact you. Try not to post phone numbers and addresses and things like this of some of the stars. That's kind of
And I don't-
disrespectful to them. So he's
And
not
I
saying
don't,
that kind of help. That you can call him or contact him directly.
And I don't even have Messenger downloaded, so don't try to contact me through Messenger.
But you can always send him a note at info@darbyhinton.com. So he will
That's
always
kind
get
of
that. And if
easy.
he doesn't answer you, you can message me and I'll pass the message along.
you know, back to Johnny Crawford. I never knew him, but I just heard. I was listening to Pandora the other day, and I just heard Cindy's Birthday come on, and that really got me. It was a really nice song for one, and the fact that he passed, it got me. It's a good song, and for anybody who's never heard Cindy's Birthday, who's not old enough to, it's a great song. Try and find it.
They've been playing it on 60s on 6. Flash Phelps has been playing some of his songs on 60s on 6 on Sirius XM. So it's kind of nice.
And I don't want to pander to your guests, but those questions were really cool. They were great. I tried to answer some while the thing was playing, while the show was playing.
Oh, good. I thought I saw some on there, then they disappeared. So thank you for doing that.
It's the writer in you. You kept writing me. I'm visual. I'm in front of the camera. I'm just watching.
Suppose that's the three of us, but there's 60 people out there, and so supposed to interact with.
But I will say one last announcement. This one is for Darby. This is his upcoming schedule. So of course we're hoping to get back in action here. So coming up at the end of August 26th to 28th, don't forget about the Western Legends Roundup in Kanab. And then he's got the Cowboy Way Jubilee. That's going to be in Texas in October. And then June of next year, of course, is the Mid-South Nostalgia Festival, which used to be the Memphis Film Festival, but I think they moved the location. Yeah, see, now it's in Olive Branch, Mississippi. So if you're planning on...
Where it was when I originally did it.
Oh, was it really? Oh, wow.
Yes, and it was called the Memphis Film Festival, and I flew in, got up the next day, and like, so how do you, like, Mississippi? I'm like, no, this is Memphis, right? They're like, no, this isn't.
It looks like you're from the schedule. It looks like you're headed into some great weather.
I'm just looking forward to seeing people again and hugging and getting.
I know what
I
you
miss it. I didn't know I was such a people person that I love it. So I'm really.
And Kanab will be the best one because we'll all be the first in line to get the hugs that have built up for a year and a
Yeah, I
half.
guess I get hugged out. You know, I mean,
what I'm
you got to
looking-
get there. You got to get one or two because otherwise, after that, it's you know.
I don't think you could hug out, Darby. It's
I'm
not
I'm not in shape like I used to be. I'll have to start working on it.
What I'm looking forward to is seeing my granddaughter, who I've never seen. My son's working in Albany, New York, in a hospital, and he's a one-man death panel apparently. But he and his wife, they had their first child in August, and I'll see her in a month or so. Really looking forward to that.
I'm going Father's Day. I get to go back and see my grandson in North Carolina, so I'm very much looking forward to that.
It is nice. The world is opening up again. Now, Reuben, your son is what? He's a professor somewhere, isn't he?
Yeah, this is a high school dropout. Dropped out 3 weeks before graduation, and then just bummed around. And I told him, you can do what you want, but I'm not supporting you unless you're in school or working. And eventually, he got his head screwed on straight. Went back to school, and this is the most surprising part. He got a doctorate in philosophy, and so I look at his textbooks. I know English, and I see the English words on the outside of the books, but I didn't know what the hell they meant. And I looked at his paper. I'm the only one in the family to read his papers, and they make no sense. But anyway, so he taught philosophy at the College of Charleston in South Carolina for a couple of years, and taught and was very lucky when the pandemic came because all the university jobs dried up. Because there's no in-person school anymore. And but he taught a class in biomedical ethics, and so this medical center in Albany hired him to basically referee issues between family members and doctors, versus doctors, family versus family, and so he's doing that now.
We started this evening talking about education, and there you go. I think that's a great wrap up for that.
Yeah.
Except Reuben has to talk about his daughter too, who's actually in the business. She actually has done a couple shows, and she's a writer.
A lot of shows. She's been working a lot on Netflix lately, and she just is completing a pilot for them. And she's really funny. And the biggest compliment I could give her is she's way sicker than I am.
I think it means like in her writing style,
Okay.
not. And her name is Stephanie Leader. So if you see her name, she is related. Which this is a funny story. Bob and I watched an episode of Incredible Hulk probably a couple of months ago, and there's one part where they're I don't know if it was Jack McGee or whoever it was, but they look at this letter, and there's a letter written to somebody, and it's signed Stephanie Leader. And Bob and I were both laughing because it was always said, oh, Reuben must have written this episode, and it had his daughter's name as the person who signed the letter, which was hilarious. So I guess every once in a while you get to get that in there, right?
Yeah, I'm still in touch with my old boss at the Hulk.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, she went on to run General Hospital forever. And she's great. Yeah. So some people you do stay in touch with.
Was that through Facebook or no?
No, that was just through
the old-fashioned way, right?
Yeah, I hired her husband as a writer on a Magnum episode, and then she became friends with my dad. Then we all went to baseball games together, and no Facebook involved. No, it was Reuben connection.
Face to face, amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, well, anyway. Well, thank you so much, Reuben, for being here. I know that was probably a little longer than you had planned.
I got to say, I really enjoyed it. I really thank you, both of you. And it was a pleasure meeting you, Darby. I hope to see you again. And maybe I probably talked a little too much, but it's because I really enjoyed it.
It's great to know the behind the scenes, what was going on and everything. And obviously we love, and everybody loved the way you took the show and I loved what you were talking about with the internal dialogue and how he kept it just on him, not just a tool to
Yes.
not have to write the scenes in. So I appreciate all that. So thank you very much for coming. And like I said, hopefully we'll get to see you soon in person.
I'd love to. I'd love to, guys.
All righty.
Well, everybody have a
Bye.
good night. Thank you, Reuben.
Hey,
Take
good night,
care.
everybody out there, and thank you.
Thanks. Bye, Darby. I'll be talking to you.